So now, to sum up the day in her own inimitable fashion, please welcome a prize-winning poet, an award-winning FM consultant with a heart-winning smile. She's a paragon of prose, pith and perspicacity. Please welcome Miss Lucy Jeynes.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Martin, and thank you to all of our presenters for today. I am the person who listens to every word that everybody says. So even if other people hopped in and out, I was here all the time listening carefully in order for me to do the summing up of the day. And before I go into just a quick sort of run through of all of the different presenters and what they covered, just to pull out some of the themes that we've been hearing about today on this topic of impact, challenge and opportunities. We've talked about winners and losers. We've talked about our frontline heroes. Trust has been a big theme, hasn't it? We've talked about the K-shaped recovery. We saw that come up quite a few times on the charts, and the workplace and how the workplace can be any place. 63% of people, the IFMA survey said, want a new type of workspace, but they don't really know what type they want. So this is part of the challenge for us, isn't it? Interesting that the top 5 FM companies will make up over a third of the market in the UK by 2025. That's a bit of a mushroom cloud that is leaving space for those more innovative, more flexible, mid-range companies to grow up into that space. So we should see some interesting changes in the market. And I also pulled out some issues around things like social value, representation of FM, whether or not we should have a trade association. Oh, we're still talking about what we should be called, but I'm not going to talk about that because I'm bored of talking about that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tell you what I took from each of those key presentations, and then I'm going to wrap up with a bit of a call to action, think a little bit about how we lead into next year, and then hopefully you'll all stay and chat in the breakout sessions. So I'm starting with Martin, who, as ever, is chairing us. There's never been a more important time to share what we've learned, he began with. It's been the busiest and the quietest year, a year of extremes, depending on where we were. And Martin, I think everybody really appreciated the fact that we had that moment to stop and think about the people that have been lost in our sector and the people who have been in the front line and been in danger in our sector. Martin promised us a look at the biggest changes, the biggest challenges and the biggest opportunities, and that FM would evolve and endure. And so then off we went with our keynote address from Simon Titchener of ISS. Certainty is overrated, he said. We need to embrace and get comfortable with uncertainty. He talked about the fact that the workplace can be any place. It's about relationships and collaboration. And what a great example of using the Nightingale hospitals to show us as a sector that we can actually collaborate with our competitors in a way that we haven't done before. Brand credibility, he said, has been made and lost. I'm not going to name any of the brands who have done badly out of this situation, but what we have seen is how quickly it can turn. We've talked about workplace change, digital transformation, and how do we justify a 7-day workplace when people only want to go there 2 to 3 days a week? And that led us quite well into some of the other presentations. We heard next from Ian Marson at EY Parthenon. He talked about hidden stresses in the economy and said that there were even bigger challenges to come. We talked about unemployment in that session, how it's a bit of a mess that furlough is disguising at the moment, and we won't really see the true picture until that finishes. He explained a bit more about the K-shaped recovery and why there would be winners and losers and how that would work. All of those companies that were giving profit warnings and how that usually leads to insolvencies, but that perhaps that pattern will be different this time. Ian did feel that confidence would return and that FM will be key in delivering the changes that companies want to make in respect of their future working. So I wouldn't say that was a kind of negative conclusion about the future. Lots to do, but I think we should be able to do it. We heard next from John Raspin, Frost and Sullivan, technology sustainability and their role in dictating success. He talked about the global FM market expecting to rebound by 2022, but that there will be client challenges, which will reflect directly on our services. And of course, that depends if you're a service provider, which sector you're in, and how your sector is going to recover. We were underprepared as a country. To some degree, we were underprepared as an industry, but we have adapted well, adapted quickly. John talked about 4 growth trends in FM. He talked about sustainability and environment. He talked about AI and robotics, health and wellness, and digital transformation. They're the things that we should be looking out for. I'm sure that at least one of those is going to be wrapped into our themes for next year's Workplace Futures. He said that FM suppliers need to go beyond problem solving for clients into value add, that this situation has perhaps presented really good opportunities for us to change that relationship and to change how we're seen, because we've had to problem solve with our clients during this period. Perhaps they are now used to bringing us to the table to help them solve other problems. User experience, he said, is going to be key. In the second part of the day, we started with Rob Harris from Ramidus Consulting, what FM needs to know about property. If you haven't read Rob Harris's Age of Unreal Estate report from the RICS, that is definitely a fascinating read. And he talks about moving from building more to building better. Buildings have historically been created as investments rather than as customer experiences, and that is really going to change. Real estate needs to become a commodity that can be turned on and off as required. We mustn't act with yesterday's logic. Now, he talked as well about the workplace experience. And as facilities managers, we've talked for a long time about how we might need to turn space on and off. But of course, the way we buy space at the moment, we've got the WeWorks, we've got the co-working spaces, but there are a lot of organizations still on leases. And so you won't necessarily see that change until people can exercise their lease breaks. Even if they want to consolidate their portfolios, they can't do it right now today. Mark Miller was next, talking about what FM needs to know about technology with all of his knowledge from Cisco. Work is not where you go, work is what you do. Or as you might say, work isn't a place, it's a state of mind. Our relationship with the workplace has certainly changed. Workplaces need to be more informative, they need to be more intelligent, they need to be more collaborative. And at Cisco, when they're creating new workspaces, they're actually building the space around the technology. They're thinking first about what tech people need in the space, and then what kind of equipment they need to go with the tech, and then they're building the rest of it around that. And he had some great slides, actually, some illustrations of what the workplace of the future might look like, just in terms of your individual tech and how it would fit together. Martin brought us back to the fact that 30 to 40% of us are in offices, and there are lots of us that aren't in offices. But of course, the technological revolution is going to apply to people outside of offices, as well as that kind of office environment we were talking about in that session. People probably won't be using the office for heads down work anymore, although later we talked about the different generations in the workspace. And of course, some of those generations, people with kids at home, people who don't have a place to work at home, might have really enjoyed using the office as their heads down workspace. I think it was Andrew Hulbert mentioned that we've got 5 generations in the workplace at the moment, and that each generation needs different things from their workplace. Finally, in this session, we did reach a presentation from a woman, because FM is becoming more diverse, even though you wouldn't necessarily think so. And Marie Puibreau from JLL was talking about the future of work. Again, 2 of her recent reports from JLL, Reimagining Work and Reimagining the Workplace Experience, definitely worth the read. It's great to see in FM now that we really do have some thoughtful, intelligent reports coming out, that it's really worth sitting and taking the time to read. You don't have your commute to read them anymore, but you do have all that time that you saved to get on top of some of this. And Marie talked about the worker-centric world, digital and sustainable enablement, and health and wellness imperatives, and how those factors together are going to be changing what people want from the workplace. 66% of people want to have hybrid working, and 24% of people want office only working, according to their studies. So the office is not dead by any means. She also referenced the McKinsey report, which defines within that hybrid working 4 different types of hybrid model. I mean, I'm not joking. We have got some background reading to do as FMs to get our heads around what these workplaces are going to be like and what the difference is between them. And her key takeaways from her session about success in the future of work are to learn, to connect, to contribute and socialize. That's what people are going to be doing in the workplace, and that's what we need to focus the workplace around. We then had Bhaskar Sudaram from Batu talking about marketing strategy, challenges and opportunities, and what is the character diamond of your organization. I hadn't come across that phrase before. He talked about how about 90% of organizations they were looking at were not really using this period to accelerate their growth. They were either surviving and getting busy with that, or they were observing and waiting to see what to do. He was very much around thinking about action, and asked how tight, how sticky is your relationship with your customer. We've certainly seen that some relationships have really become stronger over this period, and some of them it's really shown where the cracks are. And where there have been cracks, those cracks have opened into chasms in some instances. So do you really understand what the perception is of your brand and what its soul is? And you might have an answer to that, but is that what the market thinks? I'm sure David would want me at that point to talk about the IFM Net Brand survey that comes out every year. And I know there's been other work around this as well. What a great quote he came up with. People will be remembered for how they behaved in a time of crisis. And companies that don't even see themselves as part of the FM market will be key to FM in the next few years. So that might mean that we're going to have people snapping at our heels to get into this market. And that's going to be interesting to see. Bit of competition, spice things up. We moved into that Technology and FM Awards. I was a judge on those awards, and Graham Hughes from Team presented the virtual trophy to the very real winners, Wage Stream. We started the afternoon with Peter Ankerstjern, who's now the chair of IFMA and from Planon as well. Only a crisis produces real change. He started with that Milton Friedman quote. And will we be better prepared for the next pandemic? That's a good question, isn't it? The IFMA survey said that 81% of respondents expect that 33% of workers will be remote nearly all the time. 63% of them want new types of space. So it's about working where you're most effective, and that is going to be different depending on the kind of work you're doing and the kind of environment you're in. And he talked about multiple pathways to this next normal through environment and sustainability, through digital and technology, and through workplace experience. Peter said that there might need to be 4 new roles for FM. I can tick one of these already, but he thinks FMs in the future will need to be, you'll need to be a poet, a showman, an activist, and an innovator. I like that challenge. I like the idea of that. We've actually got some real creative people in FM, but they don't necessarily get a chance to bring it out very often. We heard notes from Julie Ellis, CEO of Services at Sodexo, in a partnership presentation with Dan Rogers from AstraZeneca. I really like a case study that has the client in it as well. I think it's much more credible, isn't it, when you've got both sides of that client service provider relationship. It was great to hear about their partnership working, and what a great outcome they're working towards. We want to give time back to science. People spend a lot of time in FM talking about how to define FM outcomes. That's a really good example, isn't it? It doesn't even have FM in it. We just want to make sure that we're not tangling people up in doing stuff that is taking up their time when they could be working. A fascinating case study from a company that's one of everyone's favorites right now. And interestingly, they said that this year, their customer engagement scores actually improved, given all the pressures they're under as an organization and all of the pressures we're under as a nation in this period. I thought that was really interesting, wasn't it? And there was a little mention of the idea of the return of the concierge service. That has been something we've offered in FM before in kind of affluent organizations like a Canary Wharf bank. But now the idea that actually you introduce concierge services for everybody to help them with their well-being, I think that perhaps is something that we'll see in more workplaces in the future as well, because we're working from home and we're homing from work, and that divide is never going to go back to how it was before, is it? We then had Simon Venn, Chief Government and Strategy Officer from Mighty, again talking about another service provider response. Interesting to hear about stepping up to support the nation. And again, mention of the Nightingale hospitals. Didn't we do ourselves proud with the Nightingales? And I know that they're not all operational, but that's good as well that we didn't need them. But I think we can have a lot of things to be proud of as an industry this year. I think we have done well. COVID has brought out the best in FM in terms of our speed of response, innovation and collaboration. Do you think we can keep these bests of FM going? Changing the way we work, said Simon, is only just beginning. This is the start of it, not the end of it. And I liked what he was saying about highlighting our frontline heroes. I think that is definitely going to be in my call to action in a minute. We then heard from Andrew at Pareto FM, disruptors and entrepreneurs, they described themselves. To my mind, Pareto is also the most genuinely diverse FM service provider company. We've had a long period of being an industry that had a lot of blokey engineers in it. If you go and meet the Pareto team, it feels fresh and new and genuinely a motley crew of people in the best possible sense. And Andrew talked about their experience of adapting during this time, some of the positives of being smaller and being more agile, and how it's cemented their relationships with some of their clients. Some of the negatives of this period have meant that some providers have been very exposed in sectors where they were previously strong, if you're in aviation, for example, or retail, and that bigger companies have found it more difficult to be flexible and responsive. Returning to the workplace is going to bring those positives and negatives to the fore even more. Andrew pointed out those 5 generations in the workplace and that each of them has different preferences and needs. We used to talk about that before we talked about COVID and Brexit and all the things that we talk about now, but that is still an issue, and we will still need to carry on thinking about how we don't try and generalize a one size fits all when we have got lots of differing requirements. We heard from Matt Drake up next from NG about net zero carbon. Every time I tried to tweet about him, it auto-corrected me to Dracula, which I thought was quite funny. And he talked us through the journey to net zero, and also the difference between zero carbon and net zero, which I think a lot of people didn't fully understand. It was a very practical explanation. Referred us to PAS 2060, which again, if you haven't heard of it, a little bit more homework for you. After we've stopped talking about COVID and Brexit, we will still be talking about the environment and sustainability, because we do have these carbon targets. Everyone has them, and we do need to be thinking about those once we've got over this kind of hump of getting everybody back to work. Our last speaker was Paul Bean from City FM, Adapt, Renew and Thrive. City FM, a top 10 player in the UK that don't necessarily have a very high profile, so good to hear more about them. He was explaining how City responded to the crisis in terms of supporting their people. Very people-focused presentation with lots of specific examples about how individuals in the organisation were helped with individual support that was what they needed, and also taking that opportunity while people were at home to have a really big focus on training and development. We used to treat some of our operational people quite badly in FM. I think that's changing. This presentation was a really good set of examples about how one organisation has really focused on what is the right thing to do for its team in this period where everyone is trying to work out what's the right thing to do overall. So we moved from very big picture trends through the workplace down to individuals. That was my gallop through the day. So what is my call for action? As Paul said, I think one of the last things he said, which is one of the things that I want to start my conclusion with, it's incredible what we can achieve when we have to change. That could be a last word for all of us. So what do we need to do as a profession, as an industry? We need to keep the attention on our key role in the economy, because that has really been highlighted in the media in a way that hasn't been before. Our cleaners, our security guards, our receptionists, you know, it's not necessarily been for good reasons that these people have been in the front line, the fact that they're at risk, but it does mean that they have earned that kind of badge of frontline workers, key workers. People have started to understand that actually that person that they never bothered to say hello to is the difference, perhaps, between life and death for them in the workplace. And I would like us to keep that attention on those key workers, those frontline workers. And that means better PR for the FM sector, demonstrating how we add value both with our clients in those relationships and more widely to the economy. We need to consolidate on the workplace changes we've seen this year and be ready to lead our organisations to these new ways of working. We know it's a challenge. Our clients don't necessarily know how to solve this challenge, so we need to imagine the solution and lead, not follow. This brings us back to those qualities that Peter Ankerstjerne said we needed. This is not about kind of plodding your way through a contract and throwing SFG 20 into a labour loader to come up with a price. I'm talking about imagining new solutions, leading clients in new directions, engaging, innovating, adding value. And that does mean that we need to be smart and we need to up our game. I think we're well positioned to do that. I think that we can justifiably be proud of what we've achieved. And I think we can be confident that we can kind of take what we're doing to the next level. The spotlight's on us, so let's not waste the opportunity. As Martin said right at the beginning, FM will evolve and endure. So onwards, my friends, and I look forward to seeing you very soon for a beer. But if you can't wait until whatever the date is that we can have a beer, then come and say hello in the follow-up session. Have a natter. If we were at Workplace Futures, we'd be hitting the wine now. So I'm more modern, so I'm hitting my ginger CBD drink now. And if anybody would like to join us in one of the sessions, then we'd love to carry on chatting. Otherwise, thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing you next year.